Major and President Clinton were among Western leaders who boycotted a second military parade in protest at Russia's invasion of Chechnya. Our Moscow correspondent Julian Mannion watched both events.
The day began with the strange spectacle of Boris Yeltsin mounting the red granite mausoleum where the Bolshevik leader Lenin is still buried and waving to Western leaders, including John Major and Bill Clinton, who remained at ground level below. Then Red Square echoed to the march past. Whole battalions dressed in the Soviet army uniforms of World War II. And after them, the parade of veterans, their chests covered in medals, their steps still firm after 50 years. They survived a war in which more than 26 million Russian soldiers and civilians died. Prime Minister John Major was clearly impressed by what he saw. These are the men who fought in the great battles on the Eastern Front. And this parade is designed to remind the world of the enormous sacrifices that Russia made in what they call the Great Patriotic War. But it's also designed not to embarrass the Western leaders watching here by avoiding any possible echo of the present fighting in Chechnya. But even as the Red Square parade was ending, the modern Russian army was getting ready to display its power. Only a few miles away, columns of tanks rumbled through the streets to their start positions for the full-scale military parade on the outskirts of Moscow. The flower of Russia's army was here, including the Blue Beret paratroopers. But John Major and Bill Clinton did not attend, not wishing to review soldiers fresh from the Chechnya campaign. Instead, Boris Yeltsin presided with members of his government over a procession of military hardware, which included many of the types of guns and tanks that leveled the Chechen capital Grozny earlier this year. Even in the heart of Moscow, there was no escaping the roar of aircraft as they flew low over the Kremlin. President Bill Clinton and Prime Minister John Major rejoined Boris Yeltsin as soon as the military parade was over. And if the Russian leader felt any regret over Western disapproval of his Chechen policy, he did not show it. The purpose of this ceremony was to dedicate the new war memorial surmounted by an obelisk 150 meters high. The British Prime Minister, John Major, paid tribute to Russia's valor in World War II and then appeared to criticize the modern Chechnya operation.
We share together a responsibility to spare our peoples the suffering of conflict within as well as beyond our national borders.
This is the sword. That is magnificent.
Earlier, President Yeltsin had presented John Major with a commemorative sword, saying that he would give others to Bill Clinton and President Mitterrand of France as representatives of the wartime allies. And in Red Square, John Major saw for himself the grief that still exists in Russia 50 years after the conflict. At his side, as the Veterans Parade ended, Boris Yeltsin's wife, Naina, burst into tears. Members of her family were among the millions of Russian victims of World War II. Julian Mannion, ITN, Moscow.
The only part
war veterans, like General Beregovoy, the cosmonaut, and Mikhail Kalashnikov, inventor of the Kalashnikov submachine gun, weapon of war for governments and guerrillas alike. 50 years on, this was not just a day for Russia to commemorate the Soviet defeat of Hitler. It was also a day of political anxiety, the rewriting of history, and some bitterness. Boris Yeltsin atop Lenin's mausoleum, the name subtly covered up by greenery. Many feet below him, other world leaders, including John Major and Bill Clinton. Conspicuous by their absence, President Mitterrand and Chancellor Kohl, choosing to arrive later. With this classic militaristic tone, those two absences reflect deep Western disquiet, not only at the continued Russian brutality in Chechnya, but also that Boris Yeltsin has exploited this commemoration of the Red Army's defeat of Nazism as a cynical exercise to be seen wielding power and influence on the world stage. But while these uniforms and medals paraded, large numbers of Russian veterans feel bitter and forgotten. Alone in his one-room apartment that took 40 years to get after war service, 78-year-old Yevgeny Kaldy watched the commemoration on television. Around him, mementos of his time as a war photographer. Prominent, his own photo of the Russian flag, a red tablecloth, being hoisted on the Reichstag in Berlin, arguably the most memorable of World War II. He had saved this vodka to celebrate, but some of his views on Boris Yeltsin are too rude to broadcast. Today he lives on a pension of £13 a month. The state gave him one free meal and a box of stock cubes to celebrate VE Day.
Вот возьмете Берлин, возьмете Берлин и
They said, after you take Berlin,
будете все
that's
королями,
it.
королями. Каждый
All
свой
of you
будет
will
получить.
become kings,
Обеспечен,
and
так сказать,
everyone
всё
will be
хорошо.
provided with
Ну
everything.
и вот как начали
And just as
обманывать
they
тогда, в
started to cheat
45-м,
us in 45, so they still cheat us
так
now.
и сейчас обманывают.
Yevgeny Kaldy represents an undercurrent of resentment. Billions of rubles poured into this giant prestige obelisk. And today the military-industrial complex being honored not just with the kind of Soviet-style military parade abandoned in 1990.
При этом не следует забывать, что дело обороны
Defense Minister
государства
Grachov made a
есть
public
дело
pledge to
всего
modernize
народа.
and strengthen Russia's armed forces because of continued regional armed conflicts like Chechnya. Moscow shook once again to the rumble of tanks, a display of armor and power that Western leaders, including John Major, refused to attend, not least because it included units just back from